we're working to connect a region of over 600 mil bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On tonight's headlines. As Indonesia receives the position of ASEAN chair from Cambodia, the country's President Joko Widodo says ASEAN must become a peaceful region and anchor for global stability, consistently uphold international law and not be a proxy to any powers. President Widodo's comments come at the closing ceremony at the 40th and 40th Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summits in Phnom Penh.
Stability.
The President of the United States, Joe Biden, has announced that he has requested $850 million in assistance for Southeast Asia for 2023. The U.S., Japan, and South Korea vowed a strong and resolute response if Pyongyang carried out a nuclear test. And President Marcos Jr. returned to the country early Monday morning from what he described as his successful participation in the 40th and 41st Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summits and related summits in Phnom Penh. As Indonesia receives the position of ASEAN chair from Cambodia, the country's President Joko Widodo said ASEAN must become a peaceful region and anchor for global stability and consistently uphold international law and not be a proxy to any powers. The President's comments come at the closing ceremony of the 40th and 41st ASEAN Summits in Phnom Penh. Let's listen in.
Song សង្កត់ធ្ងន់ថាមជ្ឈភាពអាស៊ានគឺជាកម្លាំងចលករចម្បងសម្រាប់កិច្ចសន្ទនានិងកិច្ចសហប្រតិបត្តិការជាមួយនឹងដៃគូខាងក្រៅតាមរយៈយន្តការដែលដឹកនាំដោយអាស៊ានទោះបីជាស្ថិតក្នុងស្ថានភាពណាក៏ដោយយើងត្រូវរក្សាឯកភាពអាស៊ានដើម្បីអត្ថប្រយោជន៍ខ្ពស់បំផុតសម្រាប់តំបន់ទាំងមូល
Indonesia's chairmanship, we will make ASEAN matters epicentrum of growth. ASEAN must become a peaceful region and anchor for global stability. Consistently uphold international law and not be a proxy to any powers. ASEAN must be a dignified region, uphold the values of humanity and democracy. ASEAN should not let current geopolitical dynamic turn into a new Cold War in our region. ASEAN must become a peaceful region and anchor for global stability. Consistently uphold international law and not be a proxy to any powers.
Now, President Widodo called on the bloc's members to try to achieve peace in the region by ASEAN way, by being consistent with the spirit of cooperation and implementing the ASEAN Charter completely. At the ceremony, Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen handed over the symbolic gavel to mark the turnover of the rotating chairmanship. During the East Summit Asia, President Joko Widodo, or Jokowi as they called him, has also encouraged East Asian countries to actively contribute to ASEAN in a bid to improve the foundations of peace in the Indo-Pacific region. He said he believed that East Asian countries must respect the rules and international relations such as the United Nations Charter and international legal instruments such as UNCLOS, which must always be adhered to. And President Marcos Jr. returned to the country early Monday morning from what he described as his successful participation in the 40th and 41st Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summits and related summits in Phnom Penh, which was held from November 10 to the 13th. The president said the ASEAN summits gave him and other heads of state the chance to give their positions, get a good idea of where things stand, and learn about other nations' concerns and current situations. Take a look.
I am pleased to report that my visit to Cambodia for the 40th and 41st ASEAN Summit was successful. Although there isn't a chance to sort of exchange views like possibly like we do, there is a very, very clear way of putting that it is an opportunity for all the member states and our dialogue partners. Meron tayong mga sa ASEAN, may kinukuhang iba na kausap din na ibang bansa kahit nasa labas ng Asia. At lahat yan, and they to give their positions, which gives you a very good idea of where things stand, what are the concerns. I think it was quite gratifying to see that there was a very large area of consensus amongst the ASEAN member states. Ganun pare-pareho kasi sa atin, yung food supply, presyo ng fertilizer, presyo ng langis, yun ang inaalala, supply side problems. Parehong-pareho sa atin. Kaya, at saka, bukod pa dun, ay merong nagkakaunawaan lahat ng member states na hindi kaya ng mag-isa. Kailangan magsama-sama, magtulungan. Addressing regional concerns and issues. This included the situation in Myanmar, the developments in the South China Sea, the fighting in Ukraine, the application of Timor-Leste for ASEAN membership, amongst others. We also had summits with some of ASEAN's dialogue partners. The dialogue partners are ASEAN's partners who do not necessarily belong to Southeast Asia or even Asia, but we consult with them, like the United States, like Australia, like New Zealand, Canada even. And so in all these meetings, I articulated our national interest and our commitment to working with ASEAN, our dialogue partners, to find common ground to address the issues affecting our region and to strengthen cooperation. I had bilateral discussions with Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen. I congratulated him on Cambodia's successful chairmanship of ASEAN this year. I also had bilateral meetings with His Majesty the Sultan of Brunei, the President of the Republic of Korea, the Prime Minister of Vietnam, and earlier today, the Prime Minister of Canada. In these meetings, we discussed how we can deepen the cooperation in key areas, and we exchanged views on important regional and global issues once again. We also had a roundtable discussion, that was the first event, organized by the Department of Trade and Industry. And we are nurturing relationships. We talked about all kinds of subjects with these business leaders. They can open doors for our SMEs so that they can participate. Even SMEs can participate in the foreign market. I invited the business leaders to visit and have a look at what the opportunities that they might find in the Philippines, arising from the process of transforming the economy, given that it seems our direction for post-pandemic recovery is bearing fruit.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden met with leaders from the ASEAN, or Association of Southeast Asian Nations, to push the U.S.'s commitment to the region in a bid to counter Beijing's influence there. Take a look.
It's wonderful that we gather with all of you again. This is my third U.S.-ASEAN summit in my presidency, and I was honored to host at the White House in May. And now that we are back together here in Cambodia, I look forward to building even stronger progress than we've already made. This is, as I said, my third trip, my third summit, second in person, and it's testament to the importance the United States places in our relationship with ASEAN and our commitment to ASEAN centrality. ASEAN is the heart of my administration's Indo-Pacific strategy, and we continue to strengthen our commitment to work in lockstep with an empowered, unified ASEAN. Today, we take another critical step, beginning a new era in our cooperation with the launch of the U.S.-ASEAN Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. Together, we will tackle the biggest issues of our time, from climate to health security, defend against the significant threats of rule-based order, and to threats to the rule of law, and to build an Indo-Pacific that's free and open, stable and prosperous, resilient and secure. And we're putting real resources behind our approach, not just rhetoric. Over the last year, my administration has announced more than $250 million in new initiatives with ASEAN. And for 2023, I've requested $850 million in assistance for Southeast Asia. We're continuing to build on that progress, following through on our commitments and launching concrete new initiatives that further strengthen ASEAN and increase connectivity across Southeast Asia.
And President Biden also launched the U.S.-ASEAN Electric Vehicle Initiative, through which the U.S. and ASEAN will work together to develop an integrated electric vehicle ecosystem in Southeast Asia, thereby enhancing the region's connectivity while ensuring ASEAN nations can achieve ambitious emissions reductions targets. Take a look.
Though through our new U.S.-ASEAN Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Initiative, we're going to work together to develop an integrated electric vehicle ecosystem in Southeast Asia, enabling the region to pursue clean energy economic development and ambitious emissions reductions targets. Similarly, we're launching a U.S.-ASEAN platform for infrastructure and connectivity to bring the benefits of the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment to the ASEAN countries. Through this platform, we'll develop projects together based on the needs you identify to create sustainable, high-standard infrastructure that supports the people of the region. We will build the better future we all say we want to see and we're going to see for all 1 billion people in our countries. We'll also discuss Russia's brutal war against Ukraine and our efforts to address the war's global impacts, including in Southeast Asia. So I look forward.
Meanwhile, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, has also announced that he has requested, as we heard earlier, $850 million in assistance for Southeast Asia for 2023. Prime Minister Hun Sen and President Joe Biden presided over the 10th ASEAN-US Summit held at the Soka Hotel in Phnom Penh on November 12, Saturday. During the talks, President Biden confirmed his administration's pledge to invest in the region, and he said in the past year, his administration has announced over $250 million in new initiatives for ASEAN. For next year, he has requested $850 million in assistance. In other news, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese described his encounter with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang as constructive at a gala dinner for world leaders in Cambodia. Take a look.
Had a very constructive discussion. We discussed AUKUS and the development. People would be aware that those issues are progressing, the dialogue between Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States. We talked about climate change and the importance of action on climate change and the link between it and economic growth and job creation. Lastly, today we've reached a substantial conclusion on the ASEAN Australia-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement. This is an agreement that has helped Australian business to gain access to the Southeast Asian market for the last 12 years. Last night I had a brief conversation with Premier Lee. It was very positive, it was constructive. He reminded me that he had written to me congratulating me on my election and that I had responded to him. The main area of discussion we had was on the upcoming 50th commemoration of Australia's diplomatic relationship with China. Short engagement, it was constructive.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau concluded his participation in ASEAN summits convening under the theme of addressing challenges together. The Prime Minister further strengthened Canada's relationship as a reliable and engaged partner with ASEAN and expanded partnerships in the Indo-Pacific. Again, let's listen in.
5 years ago, I was in Manila for the ASEAN-Canada 40th Anniversary Summit. A number of you were there too. I was with you in Singapore the following year, and then we had an election in 2019 and COVID hit in 2020 and 21. So it is extremely good that I was welcomed back here now for this opportunity to engage and to be with you all. Because so much has changed over the past 5 years, but one thing that hasn't is the need to work together to overcome the challenges we face. In fact, now more than ever, we need to double down on cooperation. Since 2017, Canada and ASEAN have grown our relationship. Earlier this week, Canada announced the upcoming launch of our Indo-Pacific strategy. This is a serious strategy that aims to deepen and strengthen our engagement in the region in the long term, putting ASEAN at the center of our strategy. This is a generational shift, and today I'm announcing concrete investments that are part of our commitment to this relationship. As you know, negotiations are underway for an ASEAN-Canada free trade agreement. We have so much to offer each other as partners, and we look forward to continuing this work together. This is why we're investing in the ASEAN-Canada Plan of Action Trust Fund. Not only will this help strengthen our partnership, but it will support the participation of ASEAN's most vulnerable in Canada-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement negotiations. To expand Canada's business and investment networks in the region, we'll invest in a new Canadian trade gateway in Southeast Asia. We want Canadian businesses to know more about Indo-Pacific markets, especially sectors and solutions where Canadian innovation can respond to regional demand. This means more jobs and more markets for Canadians, and it means more growth for ASEAN countries. Southeast Asia and Canada share strong ties between our peoples. Canada is home to some of the largest diasporas of Southeast Asians in the world. And we believe that even closer ties between the region and Canada mean more opportunities for everyone. Canada will continue to be there with you to act, to address challenges together. Thank you very much.
The U.S., Japan, and South Korea vowed a strong and resolute response if Pyongyang carried out a nuclear test. President Biden, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, and South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol issued a joint statement condemning the recent barrage, which included an intercontinental ballistic missile. Take a look.
Japan and the Republic of Korea are both critical allies of the United States. And for years, our countries have been engaged in trilateral cooperation out of a shared concern for the nuclear and missile threats that North Korea poses to our people. And North Korea continues provocation of provocative behavior. This partnership is even more important than it's ever been. We're also deepening our cooperation and collaboration on a range of other challenges. Today, we'll discuss how we can strengthen our supply chains and economic resilience, and how we can preserve peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits, and how we can expand our coordinated support for Ukraine, and how we can work towards the common goals of a free and open Indo-Pacific.
頻度、そして対応が出る挑発行為が続いています。さらなる挑発も想定される中、本日、そして日米韓の首脳会合が開催されること、大変時期を得たものであると感じています。日米韓の連携をさらに強化し、毅然と対応していきたいと考えております。
한미 정상회의가 5개월 만에 이렇게 다시 개최되는 것은 매우 시의적절하다고 생각합니다. 사실은 한반도와 양면의 정세는 강력한 수준의 한미 공조를 요구하고 있습니다. 특히 북한은 핵과 미사일 능력에 대한 자신감을 토대로 훨씬 더 적대적이고 공세적인 도발을 감행하고 있습니다.
Now, the trio met on the sidelines of an East Asian summit in the Cambodian capital. A record-breaking recent spate of missile tests by North Korea has sent fears soaring that such a test, its seventh, may happen soon. Seoul and Washington have been warning for months that Pyongyang is ready to conduct another nuclear test at any time. Sunday's joint statement stressed that the path to dialogue remains open, urging North Korea to return to negotiations. U.S. President Joe Biden has landed at Ngurah Rai International Airport in Denpasar on the Indonesian resort island of Bali today as he travels to attend the G20 summit. Take a look. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden will meet China's Xi Jinping in Bali today to set guardrails for relations between the countries as the world's 20 largest economies hold their first major post-pandemic summit. In the last 3 years, the rivalry between China and the U.S. has intensified sharply as Beijing has become more powerful and more assertive about replacing the U.S.-led order that has prevailed since World War II. Monday's talks on the margins of the G20 have the air of the icy Cold War conclaves between American and Soviet leaders at Potsdam, Vienna, or Yalta that decided the fate of millions. President Biden has spoken about the meeting establishing each country's red lines. The superpower sit-down is likely to dominate the G20 summit, which comes with food and fuel prices spiking worldwide, Ukraine mired in conflict, and the renewed threat of nuclear war, casting a menacing pall.
Oleh karena itu, sekali lagi saya menyampaikan apresiasi.
And there will be one conspicuous absence around the table in G20, Russian President Vladimir Putin. His botched 9-month-old invasion of Ukraine has made the trip to Bali logistically difficult and politically fraught, with members of his inner circle quarreling publicly and his once ironclad domestic authority tarnished. President Putin instead elected to send veteran Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov officially. Neither the war in Ukraine nor Putin's dark threats to use nuclear weapons are on the summit agenda. But while the ex-KGB man will not be at the summit table, his war will certainly be on the menu. Soaring energy prices, food prices have hit richer and poorer G20 members alike, and both are directly fueled by the conflict. Meanwhile, Elon Musk, the billionaire owner of Tesla and the recently acquired Twitter, spoke at the business conference on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali. Take a look.
Twitter, for sure, I think needs to do a lot more on video. And it's kind of a no-brainer to enable a longer video on Twitter and also enable content creators to make a living with content that they submit to Twitter. I can't speak too much about the future of Tesla product development, except to say that we do think that making a much more affordable vehicle would make a lot of sense, and we should do such a thing. I mean, I think like if anyone who does something like useful, like builds products or provides services that are of use to our fellow human beings, is doing a good thing.
Elon Musk, the billionaire, new owner of Twitter, will now go to Indonesia for a business gathering on the sidelines of the G20 summit. The world's richest person is taking part in an hour-long virtual discussion on future disruption of global technological innovation at the B20 today with Indonesian tycoon Anindya Bakri. The B20 lists Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese as attendees. Indonesian President Joko Widodo traveled to Texas to meet Musk earlier this year for talks about Tesla investing in the country's nickel industry. Indonesia has the largest nickel reserves in the world, and the pioneering electric car company is reportedly eyeing them for components for its batteries. Meanwhile, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos spoke virtually at the B20 business conference on the sidelines of G20 in Indonesia. He said that they will protect this planet and improve economic growth and well-being. Take a look.
Meet in complex and difficult times, facing the triple crisis of conflict, COVID, and climate. As business and government leaders, how should we approach the current situation? As part of this pledge, Amazon aims to power all its operations with 100% renewable energy by 2025 and is working to convert its delivery fleet to electric vehicles. Working together with all of our combined human ingenuity, we will invent our way out of this box. We will protect this planet and improve economic growth and well-being. We will do both.
And that's all we have for you tonight on this broadcast. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. And that's it for tonight's broadcast of ASEAN in Focus. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, reminding you to stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.